Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Challenges of Sustainability panel conversation, the Budapest Fashion and Tech Summit. My name is Chris Burt-Allen. I will be moderating the conversation. We have an amazing panel of sustainability professionals. We have Clare Farrell, we have Samata, Pattison, we have Anka Pieta, and we have Doina Ciobanu. I think we'll just dive in and get each panelist to give us a little background on where they've come from, what they've been doing, and what their take on sustainability is. Should we just go in order? Doina, do you want to give us a little rundown of your background?
Hi, everyone. Yes, of course. So study-wise, I actually have a bachelor in history and political science. Career-wise, I've been working in fashion for about 10 years now. And you'd think, these two are kind of such different industries, but actually I found that within sustainability, I've kind of been able to use my knowledge or experience within history, political science, geopolitics, and then my experience in fashion and trying to kind of change things within fashion. So I think what's interesting with history, obviously, it's about learning how we can make our future better, basically, and how we can avoid future disasters, right? And that's where sustainability comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to pick your brain a little bit, Doina. Next up, we have Clare Farrell. How are you, Clare? Co-founder of Extinction Rebellion. Where are you joining us from?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm just in South London at the moment, and I'm okay, thanks, despite the circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my background is I studied fashion in London, graduated in 2005, and I wrote at that time about the impacts of fashion and textiles and kind of broadly how to try and affect positive change in that space. Because of the interest that I have in science and chemistry, it was quite a technical focus that I had on kind of materials, and that led me to try and think about kind of what parameters I'd set for myself in my work. I worked in the high street, I've worked in the luxury sector, I've done startups, upcycling, lots of different things with small business. And now I don't actually have very much time to spend on clothing and fashion issues alone anymore, because since we started Extinction Rebellion, and it's obviously my life's become quite busy, causing trouble, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Very disruptive. Well, thank you very much for making time to speak with us. I'm excited to chat a little more. Samata Pattison, how are you doing? CEO of Red Carpet Green Dress. Where are you joining us from?
So I'm in the UK right now, but I'm typically in Los Angeles. It's good to see you and good to join this panel. I'm the CEO of Red Carpet Green Dress. We're a women-led organisation founded by Susie and James Cameron in 2009. When attending the Oscars for Avatar, they wanted to have a meaningful conversation about how the clothes that we all wear form part of our environmental and social impact. So one of my passions in this space is to remind everyone that we're all part of this conversation, even when we think we're not. If we wear clothes, then sustainable fashion is a conversation that we're part of. And I'm just really excited to be part of this panel discussion about some of the challenges when it comes to sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely. For those listening, Samata and I have actually talked a few times about various facets of sustainability, and she is an absolute gun, and so I'm really excited to have her on this panel. And moving on to Anka Pieta. How are you doing, Anna? Where are you joining us from?
I'm joining from Spain. Actually, I had to postpone my flight back home because of Corona, but it doesn't really matter. We know we're all in unusual times, and I'm really, really happy and honored to join this panel. Well, my background is also in fashion, and I could say I could say that I want to give up fashion for many years, but I cannot. It's somehow, I think it's my karma. It still sticks to me. So for 10 years, I was I was actually organizing one of the biggest fashion fairs in Poland, which was called Harsh Warsaw. I was like the artistic director. It was only for local brands from actually Visegrad Group. It wasn't only we didn't have only the Polish brands. Then I quit actually after seeing a True Cost movie, and then since then I made my own podcast about sustainability. Then I graduated sustainability in fashion in Milano Fashion Institute, and now I work for a startup which recollects textile waste, and I love Extinction Rebellion, if I may say.
Absolutely. I think we all have a lot of respect for Extinction Rebellion, really like leading the charge. So, okay, now that we've done introductions, I just want to get into, let's just start chipping away at the whole topic of sustainability. I don't want to assume that everyone is overly familiar with it, so I guess we can just start building a sort of basic idea of what it's all about. For those of you listening, if you have any questions that you would like to ask anyone specific or pose to the panel in general, please submit them. We're going to go to the questions towards the end of the session. And in the meantime, we're just going to bounce around and get stuck into it. So let's just start in really broad terms, maybe with Doina again, because you're right next to me on the screen. Where are we at? You know, how did we get to this point where sustainability is such a talking point?
Oh, it's a good question how we got here. I don't really know. I mean, I guess it's become a trend, which at some point when I started about 5 years ago, kind of getting into sustainability, studying it, doing courses around it, I was really against the fact that it would someday become a trend, right? I used to think, oh, it should only be people who really care about it and, you know, who truly want to change something that should be able to talk about sustainability. And, you know, as with everything human, my opinion changed 1,000 and 1,000,000 times across these years. And I actually came to believe that, no, I want it to become a trend. So I'm actually very happy that it's become a trend. And I think that's why we're seeing it as a PR point for so many companies. That's why we're seeing journalists talk about it, why it's become such a big thing. The downside of that is that it's opened so many doors for greenwashing and kind of convincing consumers to invest even more in consumerism with the kind of pretext of sustainability. So it's got, as always, a downside. But I think we're on the right path because for the first time since I started sustainability, I feel like it is on everyone's mind. It is on everyone's kind of Insta feed, TikTok feed, and so on.
Absolutely. I'm really glad you used the term consumerism because that is a major part of sustainability. I guess that's really driving it. Claire, would you like to sort of chip away at it as well? What's your take on how we got into this mess and what the ethos of sustainability is all about?
Yeah, sure. So, well, I think one of the reasons why we're in this mess is because we have very severe systemic problems and they relate deeply to our economic model. They relate deeply to the history of the fashion and textile sector, which is, rooted in colonialism and now, represents, I think, one of the most exploitative networks of industry and commerce and extractivism in the world. It's often cited as having, this huge carbon footprint, which is only beaten by the oil sector and things like that. But actually, if we take our eyes away from the carbon for a minute and we look at the human experience, the fashion sector has a huge amount to answer for in terms of human suffering and animal suffering as well. And these things are systemic. They have a long lineage, and they seem very difficult to shake off. And I think unless the fashion industry gets serious about having an openness to a change in the models that we're using, the models that we use to measure the economic health of the country, the fact that this is very much a political issue, the fact that we don't have the support of the legislators, the lawmakers who could change things by changing the rules. Nobody's changing the rules, so nobody in the game is going to change everything that they do. So I think, these are big things to talk about. And I know that from Dr. Kate Fletcher's work on Earth Logic, that, her estimation from crunching the numbers is that the fashion industry needs to reduce itself by at least 75% in terms of material throughput in order to become anywhere close to what you might term sustainable. So you can add that kind of, audacious reality to the fact that we are entering climate breakdown and likely civilizational collapse. And, I think that's particularly interesting when you look at it through the lens of fashion, because the fashion industry has a huge kind of cultural influence on people. And it has potential, being full of creative, wonderful, intelligent people, to be able to do something to help move people in a better direction. And the majority of its effort at the moment is really used on getting people to buy shit they don't need and things that they don't want because they don't feel very good about themselves. Also, famous quote from Coco Chanel, you can't sell clothes to happy women. The fashion industry has not been interested in people being particularly happy in any part of its kind of strata. So there's a huge amount of work to do from a philosophical position, I guess, when we want to talk about what is sustainability. And the industry as it stands is so far away from that. And the sustainability agenda has arguably had about 30 years within which things change by voluntary changes that could happen in industry. And it's completely failed. And I would also say that one of the things that really worries me about the sustainability conversation is the word itself, because I think sustainability has come to mean something which is not actually what we want it to mean. And when you lose control of the language that you need to be able to operate in a space like this, you really struggle to even have the conversations that need to be had to talk about what needs to change. So, sorry, that's quite a lot. But I certainly think I certainly think that's, there are many reasons why we've kind of ended up in this mess. But right now, I think we have to be very, very critical of the word sustainability and the agenda as it exists in industry and in the public conversation, in the international conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Two things that really stood out with what you just said. The first is use the word like extractive. The culture of take, make, waste. It's very linear and very wasteful, and I think that's a really important topic. And also, you mentioned some other facets. I think we often think about environmentalism, especially with climate change, but there are other factors, social factors, economic factors. For those who aren't that familiar, the UN actually has a list of SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, that cover a lot of those bases. And it's really interesting to consider the different factors that play into overarching sustainability, how we can operate without basically destroying the environment that we share. Is there anything you want to add? What is sustainability to you?
This is interesting for me because I think that where we've actually gone wrong is, in my opinion, centering the wrong locations in spearheading sustainable change. I say that because what I see when I see this treatment of sustainability is a trend, which I have to emphatically say it's not a trend. Sustainability is not a trend and should never be perceived as being a trend. It's a fundamental way to exist, to make, to interact, and to process the world around us. And the danger of kind of attaching the world trend to it is that people see it as something that they can opt into and that might eventually go away, and it shouldn't go away, and we should never wish it away. But one of my challenges with how I see the conversation about sustainability now is we've centered the wrong parts of the world in the conversation, and then we've made there's a huge uproar about where we're going wrong when we've been replicating systems that have been pioneered by extractive and essentially colonial systems. And we haven't given the due respect, platform, or even deference to the very centers that have consistently solved these problems throughout time. You'll often hear this kind of statistic thrown away around about the fact that indigenous populations who represent protect some 80% of global biodiversity. And that is in fact 100% true. But what we don't talk about enough is the fact that the areas that this indigenous community protect tend to be some 30 to 40% healthier spaces. So it's not just that we have entire swaths of the population who are skilled at protecting our planet and fostering cultural heritage, which to me is one of the fundamental pillars of sustainability that we do not talk about enough. But we have to recognize that we have experts in our midst who we're not deferring to. And so where we're going wrong is we keep platforming the same systems, the same speakers, the same parts of the world that have shown us a broken business model, and we're expecting them to lead us to the solution. And that is hugely problematic to me. The quick thing I wanted to say about this definition of sustainability, I have no issue with the word sustainability whatsoever. What I like is for people to be clear about what they mean when they say it, because cultural experiences of sustainability are so vastly different. If I use the word sustainability to my mother, she's a first-generation Ghanaian woman who moved over to the United Kingdom with my dad to study at Cambridge University. Sustainability to her in the context of fashion is growing up with tailors, growing up with materials that were quality, growing up with the mindset that when they were making pieces for weddings, funerals, or any type of ceremony, all that kind of fabric was kept and used for other purposes, a rag in the house, a head wrap. To her perspective, sustainability is going to differ vastly from, let's say, an affluent white woman who lives in Notting Hill in London. So when we say sustainability, I don't think the challenge is in the word, it's having the wherewithal and the intellectual enough approach to engage with people and to get them to define what sustainability means to them. And then you can meet on a like-for-like conversation. And so with me applying the word sustainability to the fashion industry, it's not kind of a sentence definition, it's a series of questions and answers. It's who are we involving? How are we doing this? What is the remit for people? What is the remit for planet? How are we constantly evolving these processes so that we have not only safeguards for the environment and the earth community and Earth's unspoken rights, much like the work of Vandana Shiva speaks about in great depth, but then how are we also advocating for communities around the world? And so how fashion intersects with all of that is through what we're making, how we're making it, how we're extracting it, how we're looking after the people that are doing this work, and how we're allowing people to stay connected with their cultural identity, i.e. how are we allowing people to express their fashion and still remain in contact with their cultural identity sustainably. So it's a very nuanced conversation, and I think it just requires the patience to have generative conversations to understand what the speakers mean and how the listeners are receiving what they're saying.
Absolutely. You're so eloquent, Samata. I love hearing you speak. Every time you speak, it sounds like an Oscar speech or something. Very compelling. Anna, do you have anything to add? What is sustainability to you?
Actually, it's difficult to add, but because I think everything has been said by Clare and Samata, especially, I think I feel most the same. I don't feel that sustainability should be perceived as trend, should be taken as a trend. For me, it's completely 100% wrong, and this is why we have all these greenwashing reports about nothing actually. But what concerns me and what's really a problem for me about fashion, about sustainability in fashion is that we need a revolution, and make an kind of evolution with the same tools we already use. I couldn't agree more that we have to have a holistic look. At the moment, we just take a fashion out of the whole system and we say, okay, we're going to recycle, we're going to change the textiles, and we're going to put some certificates, and that's great. And while all the big brands want to be a champion in sustainability, none of them said not even a word about limiting the production, which is the clue, and it's like it's the core of it. This is the thing, and this is something nobody can say out loud. That's why I actually wanted to be a part of this panel, because I think this is something that should be taken to the streets and should be taken to the courts and to the governments and so on, to the legislation. Stop producing so much. We produce, okay, we know all these numbers, 100 billion a year. I don't know for how many people in the world. Not all the people are using new clothes, so it's probably for half of humanity. I don't even know that. What concerns me a lot, because it's not even important at the moment. We all know that we have the tools actually to change it. We have, I think, much more prepared societies and people, much ready to do that, but we still cannot do that. And it's really surprising to me that we have fast fashion for how many? 22 years? And we cannot imagine living without it. Like, come on. I mean, and I completely agree with Samata that sustainability will mean something else to every one of us, something different for my mom, who remembers very well, especially in Poland and countries like Eastern Europe. She remembers she was wearing the same clothes for, I don't know, 10, 12 years. And now we got used to that. We have everything, like you have everything on demand, like in 5 minutes, you can add everything to your door. And even now when I'm here in Spain, I see, everywhere the containers for clothes. In the past, like it was something for recycling, but I don't remember in the past so many containers for clothes. This is a huge problem, and it touches all of us. Just recently, on Atacama Desert in Chile, another landfill was found. The whole Africa is drowning in textiles, like really drowning there. And like I don't think there is any big player in fast fashion that really wants to do something about it. And what's for me a kind of, after 3 years listening about sustainability and blah blah blah, it's really kind of boring at the moment. Like I really read so many reports and so on, and nothing really, like emissions are still growing, and there's no really a great impact of all these reports and so on. So I always changed this sustainability word, which became a buzzword, for responsibility. So are you responsible for your workers? Are you responsible for your people? Are you really responsible for your planet? And I would actually ask every brand 3 questions. How are you doing your clothes? Where are you doing your clothes? And how do you care about people and planet to make them? And this is all. And if they would like to give us an honest answer, I mean, we would know all about it. And right now we're just, exchanging the buzzwords, and that's what really concerns me, and that would really actually make me tired. And that's why I actually moved from talking to doing at the moment. And we're really like, just taking care of the shit that fast fashion, the leftovers we have in our startup. So that's how I see how much of that we have. Even though the Poland is still like, kind of growing economy, we already have much too much, every one of us,
Absolutely. Yeah,
I just wanted, if I can, to, just because Anna touched on that, and I thought it's interesting on how, no company commits to kind of less production. And I just thought it's so interesting, and I hope we talk more about it, how last year, actually, a few fashion brands, not to name names, committed to sort of going seasonless and producing and showing less collection and everything. And it was obviously just a way to kind of hide the COVID impact it had on their financial state. And then this year, as soon as business picked up, it was back to normal as if nothing happened. So again, there is that, even if it never was about sort of sustainability, but the hidden message behind these statements where, we're better, we're going to be sustainable. And then, a year passes and nobody holds them accountable. I have not seen any journalist kind of write and be like, but last year you promised something different. So again, those are things that I think we need to keep talking in fashion, because it's not just people like us. It also should come from journalists, it should come from consultants, it should come from editors, from magazines, and so on.
Can I just jump on that? Because that's such a good point.
Samata.
That's such a good point that she's just made. I think the role of media in shaping these conversations is so underestimated, because media, and whatever platform you consume, media is how so many members of society receive, digest, and interpret their news about this world. And so that point that she's just made is so important. I think that media has to step up and actually have a more academic, rigorous, intelligent, and generative approach to how they are disseminating information to their readership, because we can see how divisive media can be. So I just wanted to amplify that point, because it's one of the most important ones, I think, going forward. How are we talking about sustainability, and how are we reaching into communities and going to the media and the forms of media that they consume to help them be part of this conversation, and not using the same kind of emotive, somber tone on all of our communications? Because it doesn't work. We have to have nuances to the way that we talk about sustainability too, with young people, with elderly people. We need to have humor, we need to have hope. It cannot all be the same kind of doom and gloom messaging, because you're going to lose people who just switch off at that point. And that's a wasted opportunity to convert a mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Claire, did you have anything you want to add to that before you kind of move on to a next question?
Yeah, well, I guess we're entering a very difficult time, aren't we? Because there's a lot of people that feel concerned about the fight or flight response that people go into when you really talk about the state of the crisis that the planet is in. And I would say that the most effective antidote to that I am aware of is to get people to take some kind of action. And so from a mental health perspective, particularly a youth mental health perspective, which I think is, it's an enormous crisis, and it's going to get worse because basically they're looking at the world and the adults are not doing what adults should be doing, right? So this is a very serious matter if you're a younger person. The best thing that I'm aware of in order to get those people to feel that they can face the truth and to be able to get through the times that we're in is to encourage them to act and to collectivize and to find their agency and find their power and to use it and have a voice and not feel powerless in this space. And I think that's a problem for communicators. I mean, the fashion industry and the fashion press has absolutely failed to respond to the crisis that it's played a huge part in creating. And it also is failing on a media front to respond in a responsible way to help people to understand the issues that are before us. So it feels like a long stretch to imagine that, lots of publications are going to suddenly start encouraging people to learn, give them good information and encourage them to take action. But that is really what we need. And, there is also a place for fear-based messaging. Extinction Rebellion didn't get people to go and glue their bums to the road in the thousands by saying this might be a problem in the future a bit. It went out and said, this is a crisis. It's going to be really, really bad. It's happening now. It's going to affect everyone on every continent. Let's go out there and do something. The window of opportunity is closing very quickly. And it's basically on all of us to decide what kind of a response we want to make. And if you want to try this route of civil disobedience, we're going to put it together and we're going to organize it. So you're really welcome to join, whoever you are. And there was always an element of something recognizing the fear that has helped in that space. So I think that's also, it's a common dilemma that I hear people talking about in terms of comms, do give people hope, don't give people hope. And I'm very much on the side of not giving any hope whatsoever, telling them that they have to earn it themselves, because that is the piece I'm in the business of bringing. I appreciate that there are other places where there are other approaches which seem appropriate, but I don't think those kind of more hopeful based messages are the kinds of things that are going to get people to go out and risk their freedoms, which is kind of what I'm in the business of. So there's a reason why we're quite often sort of bringing the urgency in that way.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point. Extinction Rebellion definitely has that tone of voice, and I don't want to say alarmist because it's realist, but it is quite confronting, I guess. It's really kind of, there's the shock value to get people's attention, and it's an important part, I guess, of the communication chain. I'd just like to go a little bit more into the, I guess, where we're going wrong in the fashion industry. Doina, obviously you work a lot with luxury brands and more so ethical brands. So let's start with you again. Where do you think we're going wrong in how we consume clothes, like the rate, our cognition, the decision making? Maybe you want to shine some light on the production and distribution elements as well. Like, what are the gaps that are leading us down this sort of dark path?
I think what I want to really emphasize here, and that's kind of a point that I've become more and more passionate about, because my answer probably about 2 years ago would have been slightly different. I probably started with circularity as where I would see fashion has to kind of start from. But right now, I think getting rid of harmful materials is, first of all, what should be the priority, because fashion has become addicted to synthetic fossil fuel derived materials. And that is a huge problem that I think is very often overlooked in the media when discussing about sustainable fashion, etc. And it's even become quite a greenwashing message, right? You know, we're reusing this plastic in order to make this and that and the other.
Yeah,
and
vegan
yeah,
fossil fuels.
Yeah, exactly, vegan alternatives. And you know, whilst circularity and other issues are definitely important to me, why this issue is so important is it's not only going to harm our environment in the long term, but it is harming us humans today. So I don't know that many people know, but actually the textile industry is the biggest pollutant in the world of microplastics. It accounts for about 34% of all microplastics in the world. And it's not something you think about, right? When you're wearing clothing, you would not think that wearing a t-shirt would be sending out microplastics. And microplastics have been linked to things like sperm drop in men, inflammation, heart attacks, respiratory problems, and so on and so forth. So it is a problem. It is a material that is harming us today while wearing it. So why would we be given the option to wear a material that is literally slowly killing us and reducing our life expectancy? So to me, like, this synthetic fossil fuel derived materials have really become like, that is where we need to really take the first step in fashion. There can't be circularity if we keep recycling these materials and again sending out microplastics that again are harming our health, the health of the environment, and so on and so forth. So I think, you know, that is for me really like the pillar right now that I am working on promoting as much as I can, and working with brands on trying to change that, even though, you know, the industry again is very dependent on synthetic fossil fuel derived materials.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the circularity is a really important point. And I think what I'd like to add there is, you know, I think we have this idea that plastic is, you know, has great circularity because, you know, it's accepted in the recycling bins, and, you know, everything's made with recycled plastic. But as far as I know, it can only be recycled, you know, once or twice before it degenerates to the point that it can't be used anymore. It ends up in very low grade uses, like putting it in roads or playgrounds or something. So it's bad news. You're absolutely right.
And then you know, a lot of products are mixed in materials, so they mix synthetics with other, say, natural fibers, and then it becomes basically impossible to recycle, or very, very difficult and too expensive. But the thing is, like, why even get to that circularity problem when we just should not even be given the opportunity to wear something that is literally harming us by breathing air, which is one of the most natural things to do. We shouldn't even get to that point.
Yeah.
Can I just add on this circularity thing, Chris, because I think it's really important to make a distinction.
Yeah.
What's happened with the conversation with circularity is that it's been conflated with the idea of creating products that can just kind of exist and then become something else, and then exist again and become something else. And that wasn't really ever the premise or the basis for introducing this concept of circularity into the fashion industry. The circularity conversation really was inspired by the cradle to cradle methodology, which doesn't just look at this one notion of products that can keep existing. It looked at things like material health. That was a fundamental pillar of it. Water stewardship, that was a big pillar of it as well. Energy use, social fairness, all of these were elements of the circular model. But what we've done as an industry is we've picked the pieces that we like. So we've said, oh, if we can create a product that can kind of exist, and then we can say it can exist again in another format, and then when we can no longer use it as clothing, it can become insulation. Hey, we're being circular, but that's not the actual premise of it. And I think, as was mentioned before, if we're not talking about like decoupling and reducing production, then we don't ever have true circularity. Like, so I think people and brands are falling on this thing of like, we've got a recycled t-shirt, and they're using circularity as the way to have two revenue streams. They'll have the clothing that they make usually, and then they'll have these items that they'll say, hey, it's recycled, it's circular, but they're just still making way too much stuff. So I feel like the circularity thing is becoming a bit dangerous because it's not really being used on the foundation of why it became so important in the first place, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so true. Just jumping back to Claire, I guess the same question to you. What do you think is the major flaw in how we are demanding and consuming and also producing clothing at the moment?
Well, I think what Samata's just said is one of the major problems, which I've been sort of deeply frustrated with the fashion sector for a long time, and its inability to take a sort of system-wide view, for its inability to even take a political view of things, but only to sort of say, well, we can keep most things the same and we'll just melt things and recycle them over here. And, we can, it's okay, it's still be made by slaves, but, it'll be circular, right? So there's always been a big disconnect between a lot of the elements that I think really matter. I think some people that I've been working with in Extinction Rebellion who, we did some quite successful fashion campaigning at the beginning of XR, which was, to go and block the roads outside London Fashion Week and take a kind of classical, non-violent kind of protest to the outside. Remarkable, by the way, that British Fashion Council were much more keen to meet me after I'd stopped making clothes. But anyway, if you go and block the roads outside, then they talk to you, just for the record. But the point of doing that was to say, we're going to come and we're going to disrupt this cultural space. It's a cultural event. It leads a conversation, which for sure the volume of the damage might be seen to be done by your sort of H&M, your Zara, your Topshop, whatever the big numbers that go through that space, that fast fashion space. But the legitimacy for that is really set through the fashion calendar, through this kind of much more sort of elitist scene. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to go to that space and say, if you walk into Fashion Week now, do you think it's an emergency, or do you think everything's just fine? And if you think it's fine and you're in a cultural space, supposedly, then that's not okay, because we're in this huge crisis. I think one of the things that I feel excited about, and I hope it's going to sort of move somewhere interesting, is that the people who were working in that space in XR have started to work on looking at a degrowth agenda and think about how to bring that part of that thinking into the conversation with a wholeheartedness that says, we want to look at what could be done if you recognize that fashion is a dominant Western clothing system that basically culturally obliterates all other clothing systems on Earth, which is largely, I would say, what's the truth of the world in terms of clothing these days. Other things get seen as a fashion system, a system of dress, an indigenous clothing system or whatever. That's all kind of over there. And then fashion is this massive monolith, which is basically like the things that we buy in shops in London. That as a recognition, as we've been mentioned, as a cultural sort of domination alongside the sort of the economic reality of the industry, feels like a sort of wholehearted place to start from. And I think if you look at clothing through that lens as something which I think we've been saying it isn't culture, it's destroying culture. If you see fashion that way, then I think we could start to look at the way in which we use it, the way in which we buy it, the way in which we go about owning it and caring for it or not, tending to it, throwing it away, whatever. So it would be, I think what's wrong is that we don't see it on a system level, that we often see it as something that we can sort of access very, very quickly. And perhaps we would take a step back and say, I'm part of a system that I actually find quite disgusting. And I don't want to be part of it in that way anymore. But it feels very difficult to get out of. And so I don't think we've nailed everything, but I think the idea of coming in with a very strong sense of how do you seek justice in this context when it's so far down the road and when things are so deeply unjust and so entrenched. How do you look at dismantling some of our ideas about what fashion is and what it does and why we even want it anyway? And some of my friends have been saying we call it capital F fashion with a capital F, to make clear that we're talking about the fashion that we kind of feel we've been part of. And then also, how are we going around talking about the fact that we need to reduce the scale of the materials throughput and the quantity of that stuff? And how does that potentially relate to conversations that we've heard about, a just transition, for example. I know people in the sort of outside of the environment movement and outside of the sustainability space often haven't heard the term just transition before. And what does it really mean if you're going to have a transition to an economy or a way of doing business which isn't driving us, off the cliff ecologically, whilst it takes care of people?
We're really running out of time. Could you just wrap up? Because I want to hear from Anna before we tackle some questions.
No, that's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. I mean, we should probably meet in the real life and just talk about it more in the real round table, and then it's gonna would probably change something. Well, my point of view is quite similar. The problem I have is also much more in the roots and much more down, and that's why after 3 years of being in this issue of sustainability and circularity and so on, I started to ask much different question to myself also, and I started to ask to people that I talk with about sustainability, completely different questions, like what we really want to sustain from kind of routine system that fashion shows, and also like we like to think that we care about environment, but we don't think that we're part of the environment, like to rescue nature, and then like we don't think that we are the part of the nature. Most people don't think like that, and actually fashion is kind of, I would say a great example of someone who taught us that, that we're not a part of the nature, that we're kind of disconnected also with all these artificial clothes from the nature. They don't breathe, they're made of oil and so on, and we're happy to have it because they're durable and so on, and you can make lots of them. So for me, not this plastic thing is the biggest problem. Of course it is, but the quantity we produce, and we all know from all the reports that the pace of producing came back to the state before COVID. It's even faster because the big fast fashion brands are chasing platforms like Shine or Boohoo and so on. And they don't care at all for anything like sustainability. What is this, right? So if we're gonna keep on moving in this model, I give up. I don't want to do anything more, because this train is like completely out of control. And for me, the most important at the moment is like really education. I would say like this is the only thing I believe in, and more people goes in riot, more people go to protest, more people pushing for systemic changes, more people using civil disobedience. This is something that I truly believe in, and more people are conscious about what they're using, but I don't want to put too much pressure on people. This is what we were probably asking about, what advice we have for the people, for consumers and so on. I would say just don't buy, but for sure it doesn't work for everyone. So I would say just ask different questions. I don't know, but let's also not, because I think we should address the questions we have. We addressed already the questions we have for fashion, not to rewrite people. We should change the address of the questions we have for fast fashion, and just change this point of view, and just change the target. We're kind of afraid of big brands. People are afraid in a country like me. I'm one of the haters of fast fashion brands, and I know I'm on their blacklist because there's just few people like me, or like Extinction Rebellion, and nobody treats us actually very serious. But if they hear us, they're kind of patronizing you, like just don't say it out loud, because we're really doing something here, we're trying, and you're just a girl who wants to beep in the ass. And I completely don't agree for that. And I think if there would be more people joining Extinction Rebellion, or maybe, I don't know, more lawyers, more educators, just you can find one of field of your expertise and try to work on there, that would really change something. Right now, I think we're just patronized and trained to just follow, sustainability as a trend, and exchange our wardrobe for more eco textiles, which I completely agree.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
We have literally 1 minute left, so I just need to.
Sorry.
I just wanted to go straight into questions. There are few questions came through about leather, like opinions on vegan leather. Does anyone want to take that? We don't have time to get all the answers, but Doina, why do you say that, Doina?
I can quickly start. Well, as I mentioned, and I get the animal well-being concern, and that is a very valid concern. But when you get into fossil fuel-derived synthetics, you can't talk about animal well-being, because in the end, animals will also be harmed from that, and we will be harmed from that, and the environment in general will be. So, and that's what annoys me, because there are not enough regulations. There are amazing startup, innovative ideas for vegan leathers, like leathers made from apple residue, from oranges, cellulose, mushrooms, etc., that can also support, like has been talked before, small communities around the world. But the big brands are investing in these very catchy vegan leather. That means let's just go and buy the cheapest material, like a fossil fuel derived synthetic leather, and market it as vegan leather. And the industry, promotes it and helps them and supports them. And that annoys the hell out of me. But that's where we need more regulations.
Yeah, well summarized.
And also, can I add something for the leather? If you're interested in the real leather, there is a great report about it, which shows how the big brands are actually a part of deforestation. I mean, the real leather. So this conversation is quite difficult. Slow Fashion Factory made a great report about it, and I really recommend you to go there. It's called Edit Sustainability 220 something, but on Slow Fashion Factory you'll find it, and it shows like 100 main brands in the world are connected to deforestation toward their suppliers. So I would say it's not very clear which is better. It's just better not to use all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I would just say it's probably a good time to inject. Say if you want to learn more about this stuff, there are some really, really nice documentaries. I would recommend A Plastic Ocean, Minimalism. What else is there? The True Cost, which was mentioned before, amazing. Let's just quickly go through each of the panelists and just get final thoughts or things that people can do to continue their learning. Do you want to go first?
Yes, sure. Not to be pessimistic or anything. You can do a lot as an individual, of course, being responsible, making the changes you can implement with your financial abilities and within your region, etc. However, what really matters is the impact from the top corporations in the world, because that is really where the biggest pollution is. So for me, what's even more important than turning off the water while you're brushing your teeth and turning off the light and going vegan and things like that is really electing the right representatives, pushing for regulators to introduce more laws around what material can be used, how much can be produced, etc. Like that for me is really, that's the real point that I'd like us all to think about. Really push our representative, push our governments to take action, because it's really, you can never convince 100% of people to become sustainable, and the people you'll convince will simply not be enough compared to everyone else.
Oh, sorry, I think we need to wrap up. Okay, let me just wrap up by saying to everyone tuning in, please follow these panelists, find them on Instagram, do your research, look at the organizations that they're working with, and please sign up. Does anyone have anything specific they want to mention?
I just wanted to really quickly say that for me, global cultural sustainability is really, really important, and making sure that the conversations we have about this subject reflect global communities who are very rarely in the rooms. As much as we think we lead this charge, there are communities on the ground actually doing the work. And so I think it's important to make space for the leaders of those organizations and not always feel like we have to speak for them. So that's my only thing I wanted to add.
Cool. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you very much to the Hungarian Fashion Design Agency for hosting this summit. Thank you for having us all, I guess, at the Budapest Fashion Design Summit. Thank you for tuning in to the Challenges of Sustainability panel. And thank you so much, panelists. I really wish we could have sat for longer and I could have picked your brains further. But thank you for sharing your expertise with me and each other and also the wider audience. Thank you very much, everyone. You can close the room now.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.